going to start going around the room with the, we have a guest here. Catch you with your mouth full.
I'm Eric. I'm from Belgium. And yeah.
Welcome, Eric.
All right, Eric.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
My husband, Brent.
Welcome, Brent.
It's okay.
I do. Special guest. My guest this morning is Supervisor Mike Wilson, and I will do a longer introduction later. He is our speaker. Clearly, she twisted her last
Southwest Eureka.
So this is the poster for our fundraiser. This is going to be a huge thing. It's going to be on the January 23rd. And so we're going to, days, like we will have some booth in the center, and people will walk around and discover different countries. We're going to have food, different like pictures, presentation of the countries, and we also want to do a big raffle, so you can win different products from like the different countries. So it's going to be really fun. We have some tickets. We don't have the tickets yet, but you can like pre-order them. So it's going to be around 15 per adults and 10 per students. If you go at the entrance, it's a bit more expensive, so we can sell tickets. It's easier for us. And it's a lot of work actually, and we're really happy to present that and to do that. All the money we're gonna earn from that is gonna be for the different trips with the Rotary, like the optional trips to Hawaii, the Western Safari and stuff like that. It's really important to have this fundraiser because it's pretty expensive and some people just can't afford them. And thanks to that, we can everyone can go there with different trips, so it's really important for us. Otherwise, last weekend we went to the chocolate factory with Eric. It was really interesting, and we could have tasted many like chocolates, so it's pretty good. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start, since we have a lot of newer members this year, I wanted to start introducing a couple of Rotary I guess highlights. January is Vocational Service Month, and so I thought it would be a good opportunity to just share what vocational service is. I think it's one of the committees that maybe once a year, twice a year, get some action. So I don't know if we're still in the middle of looking for vocational service award nominees.
Oh, no, we are in the, yeah.
Okay. But vocational service includes using our profession and our professional networks in our Rotary Club activities, using our expertise to address community problems. So this month, actually, last week, I had one of my customers come up and ask me to do a presentation at Ollie over at HSU around banking. So I'm going to take advantage of my profession and share that with the community there at HSU. But if anybody has anything that they're doing similar to that, where they use their profession, I'd like to highlight it sometime this month as a recognition as possible. So please share if that's something you're doing out there, so I can let the community know and the club know what we have going on. So things you can do this month is speak to your vocational chair, our vocational service committee chair, and see how you can get involved there. Observe the month, and then Rotary International has some resources, the Rotary.org newsletter and the Rotary Service blog to learn more about ways you can get involved using your vocation. Some recognitions. I'm glad Charlie was able to walk in. So I wanted to throw out that she's a brand new, brand spanking new homeowner. Exciting. I don't know if you'd like to share anything about it.
It's actually my dog Jesus' house. He's just letting me live there.
You have to write your mortgage check.
So when's the housewarming party?
That's a great question. After the art show.
Fun. Scott hasn't made it back yet, so I'll save this for when he does return. So please, I haven't seen any new recognitions, but send them to arcs@recognitions@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you guys are up to, and I'd love to share it with the club and the communities. So quite a few upcoming events tonight. Tamara, you want to share?
Hi, I'm Tamara. I took on ownership of Arcata Pilates in August, and thanks to Greg. And I just rebranded it, and we redid the floors, and we painted, and it was like the biggest project I've ever done. And we did it all over the holidays. It was crazy. And we're having the celebration tonight from 4 to 9. We're doing a ribbon cutting at 5, and we're going to party and celebrate and have live music and food and all the fun things. And it's right down the street across from the co-op. So please come and celebrate. Yeah, thanks.
All right. And Chris?
On your desk, on your table, a little flyer here. Someone told me the best things in life are free. So this event is free. And I'd like to remind you what a great opportunity. We're all here in this room today because somebody asked you to come. And join in fellowship in the Rotary. This is a great opportunity to knock on the door of a friend of yours, significant other, take them out for a date beforehand. I don't care what you do, pizza, whatever. But maybe it's a great time to bring them, introduce them to some people in Rotary, a little bit about what we're doing. And we're having this big chill. What a great movie. It's a classic like many of us in this room. Somebody asked me a favor once, I declined. That was part of the scene in the movie. Anyway. What else do I need to tell you? Oh, next week, it starts at 6 o'clock on Friday night. So it's pretty easy to get to. Social between 6 and 7. So come, the event is free and should be a great time.
Well, so we have 3 board members in the Eureka Theater. We just, or 2, but Maggie just left right now. But we just had a quick meeting and wanted to remind you that there is beer and wine. Oh, and we do have a bar in there too. Yeah,
Well,
beautiful lawn
I
sign.
appreciate you saying that because I thought everybody already knew that there was.
You know, it's amazing. People don't. They walk in, they go, "Oh, you can get a beer here." Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Makes it a little more social, makes it a little more fun when you bring somebody to have that.
Well, other than these meetings, and we're all here under protest. I think it's important to mention that it's not a free event. It's free to the community because Arcata Rotary, our club is sponsoring. So it's not
That's
literally.
true, but I think it's a great opportunity for people to ask somebody to come with you.
We're
Kind of an easy
sponsoring
thing to
it,
do,
that's
so.
why.
Well, thank you, Meg. We appreciate it. So,
There's nothing to do.
again, it's a free event.
Come enjoy. Thank you. So the following day, the seafood boil. I got the right flyer this time. Not a free event. I think there were still tickets out there. Brett, are there any more available? Do you have any more? Okay. 2 more. And then Ray's got some as well.
Goes with the bread.
Okay. These things got it. Okay. And then Tomas covered the National Center, so did a good job there. So the Planned Parenthood Choices Breakfast is Friday the 24th. I know it's a pleasure to meet you. Can support Planned Parenthood. And then the College Career Pancake Breakfast.
Here's, let me say something real quick. I have the flyers and donation packets on the table. You can take a look at that. I don't want to reiterate very much because you can all read. But the one thing is the College and Career Center really does need your help. It's by donations, and that's how they get their funding. It's all by donations. They are the only College and Career Center north of Santa Rosa. So it's a wonderful asset that we have to the community to help the kids. So please come out, help any way that you can. I will have tickets available. They're a little late. They'll be available on the 15th. So I'll bring them to the next Rotary meeting. Okay, thank you. That's February 3rd.
You need volunteers?
I might need a couple, and if I do, I'll reach out. It'll just mostly be for help. Yeah.
And then coming back to the Eureka Theater is the February mixer. The Arcata Chamber of Commerce is hosting the mixer in Eureka.
Eureka Theater.
So put that on your calendar.
Those of you who haven't come to these things, it's free snacks and drinks for one thing. It's a fast event. It starts exactly at 5:30. It's done by 7. And last time, how many sunrisers were? There were like 6 or 8 of us who came to the event. So a bunch of sunrisers come to these events. And, you know, free drinks and a little bit of time and some fellowship. It's all gone.
Chris Casara is going to be catering on that one. And we might have music by El Boogie, DJ, Martha back there. And I think that we're showing Humboldt County short films or something like that. They're putting something together special just for that night. I'm not totally sure what it is, but
We'll figure it out.
minutes before.
And then the one in March is at the Arcata Umpqua Bank, hosted by AJ. So we're all going to have to show up in force. See what kind of snacks you can put on the table.
The club belongs to the chamber?
We do, yes. Thank you.
And we've been nominated, by the way, as one of the nonprofits.
That's right.
Yes.
By the chamber.
Not for the year yet. So save the date for Charter Night, Saturday, February.
Can I talk about that for just a second? It is out in Samoa at the mansion. In case you didn't know, there's a mansion in Samoa. There was in 1906, a year after Rotary was formed. Anyway, we are planning a really fun event. I got together at the Johnny Boy Brewery on a Sunday and made a batch of West Coast IPA that will be featured at the event. But we are also talking about having it be kind of a barbecue event. This is Saturday, so we would have the day or so forth. So if there are any other enthusiasts in the club who would like to join myself and I think Scott Heller and President AJ, kind of taking care and doing a barbecue, we need to get together and plan our menu and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, it is also going to be a free event. So covered by some of your budget that is with the fellowship committee. We're looking forward to doing it. So if you're interested in being involved, please let me know because I'm taking care of it. Thank you.
What time is that?
It is at 6 o'clock.
And everybody will get an invitation, and we're also going to invite any past charter members who are no longer in our club. So if you have those names, and past presidents, please email them to me or to AJ, and somebody will get them to me because we'd like to officially invite them and, maybe bring them back into the fold. But at least give them free.
Thank you. So District Training Assembly North is at the Sequoia Conference Center Saturday, March 21st. I don't know if you care to say anything about it. Invitations haven't rolled out yet, but essentially you'll get an invitation in the mail, a registration invitation, and your pay through the website. And again, it's on the club will reimburse you for.
Club reimbursements, yeah, when you go, so.
So I say that for Steve to get turned into treasurer here. Great way to learn about Rotary.
Especially for the new people.
Yes. So I'm not sure if you've, it's pretty apparent, but the Rotary Club in Australia could definitely use some support. It's unbelievable what's happening over there. I think they've, the last heard like 1 million animals have been affected, so killed. So if you can, they have a website. You can Google Bushfire appeal, and donate. Got an email message from our international president, Mike Pazeian, and Rotary and Toastmasters are teaming up. So that would be interesting to look for some Toastmaster club members and check out our club, and then vice versa. So they meet every second and fourth Thursday at noon at the 1700 Bayview. So kind of curious to check them out. I don't know if anybody else would want to join me, but it'd be interesting to see how we can collaborate. I think the idea is getting up here and speaking to a crowd. If you're not comfortable, it's something to practice through them. I'm sure they have some something they can teach me. So let me know if you're interested in checking it out. I do want to take a moment and invite Ray and Mike up. Last meeting, Mike did his craft shop, which I believe is the last and final task to transition from red badge to blue badge. So, since Ray is more membership committee, I would make the official transition. Excellent. So, if you can, right away, why don't you take off that red badge? Let's transition to the nice blue. Okay. Oh, great.
Just put one on one side and one on the other side.
Wow.
Thank you for making that transition fairly quickly. I keep bringing through the ranks, and we got to board meetings and got through the sergeant process fairly quickly. Thank you. So reminder, backpacks. It looks like you guys were doing something this morning. Is it still? Yeah, we need someone to deliver.
Nope, Dustin signed up.
I'm really happy for all the people that have signed up. Johnson out of Sign Up Genius, and Maggie picked up. I think you're picking up for the next couple of weeks, and then we've got people signed up for bagging. And I forgot who's delivering today. Dustin, are you? Dustin's delivering. So we're set up. I love it. It's great. I can look at it. It's all set.
Thank you, everybody, for signing up. It makes the process so much easier. So, Greg, to introduce our guest speaker today.
We'll do a donation to the wardrobe.
Only owns one jacket.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Wilson, our supervisor, your supervisor. I'm actually in the first district. Mike and I, believe it or not, have known each other just shy of 40 years. We started out as children. In southern Humboldt. And Mike came to Humboldt State, is a registered engineer, professional engineer. I'm a registered amateur engineer. And started his political career as an elected official as a commissioner of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. That being so long of a name and hard to remember, he decided to run for Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, which is much easier to remember. He was elected 4 years ago and is now heading into a tough, unopposed re-election, which apparently means people are relatively satisfied with the job he's done so far. So he's going to give us a little update on what's going on with the County of Humboldt and give him a warm welcome.
Hello, good morning. I'm here because Carol Vandermeer texted me 2 days ago and said I need to be here. I'm just coming off of a slight vacation, so I don't have any presentation per se, so I'm just going to talk about what's going on in the county a little bit. And then I see a lot of new faces for me anyway, so I just want to introduce myself as well and sort of what is county government in general, and make Greg get water for me. That's true. But I also want to say thanks to everybody for doing all the work you do. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, AJ. This is great. Thank you for starting your business and getting it going, or kind of restarting it, Pilates. I was a Pilates person for just a short while when I was getting my hip redone. And I found that every time I go there and there would be a new instructor, they'd say, "What are you doing here?" Right? Because why is there a guy in this place? That was kind of a funny thing that always happened to me. And I have to say, with the movie The Big Chill, I don't know, there's many people who were here that they weren't even born when it came out. And at that time, it was considered nostalgic. So I don't know, maybe it's like anthropological now. So I was raised here in Humboldt County in southern Humboldt with Greg. We went to school together down there in high school. I did come to Humboldt State for a couple of years, but found that my rock and roll lifestyle was just not combining well with my school being at that time. So I had moved away to San Francisco, as if that was less rock and roll at the time. And went to school there for engineering, civil engineering, where I got my degree. From there, I worked for some international firms, mostly in the Pacific area, both in as far away as Guam and as Arizona on the other side, mostly doing environmental cleanups for military bases and for refineries and those sorts of things. Kind of got tired of that, did a year-long stint, kind of a walkabout, I guess you'd call it, and traveled from Asia to Europe overland around 91, which was phenomenally dangerous, although I didn't realize it at the time. I look back on it and think I survived, which is amazing. Came back to the Bay Area, realized I really loved Humboldt County, the place I grew up in, and came back here to do graduate school at Humboldt State in the environmental engineering environmental systems engineering program, where I studied basically at the Arcata Marsh and did my graduate studies there and in natural systems. And then from there, worked for the county for a little bit, but mostly from that point on, worked with my life partner, Laura, mostly doing engineering projects for tribes and for municipalities, kind of landscape level engineering and planning work. I was elected in 2005 to do the Harbor District for that amount of time. And then, as Greg said, I was elected 4 years ago to do supervisor stuff. So that has been a great adventure. What kind of pushed me into doing the supervisor work is that the community development work I was doing as elected for the Harbor District was a lot of fun and distracting to my everyday job, which was doing engineering work, and it just drew me into that path, and I enjoy this position quite a bit. It pays less for more hours, but quite honestly, on a personal level, the freedom of not doing invoicing and all of those other things that sort of like keep that all together is a fair trade-off for me. And this is a job that's quite varied in its what we do, and so it's fun. I'm going to talk about that right now. So I represent what is the 3rd district. You can see a little map right there. It's mostly Arcata. Really is like 80% of the population, more or less, but it includes Manila and it includes Blue Lake, which is the center of the universe according to some folks, and it includes Neelan, and it really has a corner that goes all the way down. You can see it's just almost touching Fortuna. So, haha. I have some corner of the Headwaters Forest in there as well, but that's the district. Mostly county government people don't. I mean, to be quite honest, like most people, it's sort of invisible in terms of like what they understand in terms of governance, because most people can understand what a city council person is and a mayor. There's things they hear about quite often, but supervisors is really less so in that. But mostly what we do is govern the jurisdictionally the county, of which there's 58 counties in the state of California. Most of them have 5 supervisors, except for just a few, which have maybe more if they're a city county. And it's really just an arm of, it's really an arm of the state, to be quite, to kind of put it where it's most visceral, I suppose, because really most of the budget that the counties manage is state mandated funding related to state programs for social services, right? That is that's like kind of the biggest hunk of money that really that we have. And I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but our budget's $400 million a year. We have a balanced budget every year. This year we do. And a good chunk of that is that. Now, another big chunk of that money in what we manage has to do with public works. And again, this is all outside of cities. So sometimes people will call me and say, like, yeah, I have a pothole in front of my house, or whatever that is. And I ask, where do you live? And not uncommon. They say, I live at, on Buttermilk Lane, or someplace that's in the city, and I have to refer them to the city council members that are here, Brett and others, to deal with stuff. And sometimes there's things on the border and stuff like that. So those are kind of the main chunks of where we govern. And then basically land use decisions, how we manage land use, again, outside the cities, like what's the zoning of certain things? What are the land use impacts of everything from environmental issues to social issues to gun ordinances to all the way to water quality or whatever that may be. So we have those issues too. And then we intersect a lot with other elected bodies, which is like the sheriff and the DA. We mostly just manage budgets associated with those agencies because they're separately elected offices. And so we have relationships with them, and we can encourage them to take on policies or do certain things in certain ways. But in essence, we have to work with them as equals as opposed to oversee their departments in that way. So that's something that I want to make sure is clarified with people. In my job, it's kind of 3 parts. One is customer service. So just basically, I get calls for people who are just dissatisfied with things or want things to happen within the county and helping them do that. A lot of that has to do with potholes, to be quite honest, and roads are very important thing. I want to point out also in that regard, like I have to remind people that we can fix potholes and put it on the list and do those sorts of things. And we're $200 million behind in terms of maintenance of roads in Humboldt County because roads as a technology are a relatively new thing, but most of the roads in the county were developed under basically for wagons and horses and those sorts of things. And the geometry and the substrates of them are just old and terrible. And really the amount of money that is required to manage that is not being brought in by the taxes of a very few people that actually live in this county, which is quite remote because we're almost the size of Connecticut. We're 2 hours driving across in each direction. This is a big county and 130,000 people, most of which live in towns. And so the amount of money to manage these rural roads is we're way behind, as one might expect. But we're working on it. But I also remind people the week after we fix potholes on any road, I get phone calls asking for speed bumps. Every time. I said, you had them. They were just inverted, right? Now here we go. There's some more. So that's sort of public, that part. And then there's the advocacy. So I advocate for this district on a board of 5. And as you may know, we have meetings and things that don't have straight across unanimous votes. Although most of them are, just like in the city council and anywhere else, there's a lot of pedestrian things we do where it's all mostly worked out and we can vote and move on. But there's a reason why we have 5 people is because there's disagreement. We have to work those things out. And then a lot of what I do is basically advocating at the state and national level for laws and policies that are beneficial to our district, and especially in the return of assets. And I tell people oftentimes that we concentrate on elections, national elections, as if they are the most important thing. And as you know, your feeds come in on your social media and everywhere else. It's probably 95% or more what the president is doing, or maybe what your state level people are doing. But really, in your electoral processes, you have to vote for the team that basically receives and manages those assets as they come back that you pay in your taxes. You pay them out, right? But you got to get your team together to actually harvest that back in and redistribute it and manage it for all of the things that are around you. And I would say that even just if you just look out this window, the construct of your everyday life was basically a series of decisions that were made locally by people who are elected locally, right? And so, and just from your water to your sewer to your sidewalk to your parks, everything that you, when you walk down the street, or every construct that you have that's around you were made by local decisions, not as much so much by national decisions, right? So your local vote matters more than anything, and your involvement in local politics is actually fundamentally far more of an efficient way to extract value from your political exercise that you do. So I highly encourage people to do that. So that's kind of the overall, so this is like the speech I give to like high school kids, right, for the most part. At this level, I know there's supposed to be like 5 minutes for questions, but I just want to cut it. I'll just let you know this next year, mostly, again, we're like every government, most of our time is just keeping the gears of the social fabric of society held together, and so it's, it's budgets, it's our public works, it's our social services, and all those things are kind of grinding on forward. We have issues of homelessness, we have issues of environment, those are all moving forward. So I think probably in this next year, for the county, we're going to be introducing a plan to start to, has anyone, I'm going to ask this question, everyone has at some point or another probably dealt with county services in one way or another. And we have offices all over the place, and it's pretty inefficient, and they're in old buildings if we own them, and we're paying a lot of rent if we don't, and we have ADA issues all over the place, and so we're trying to think about how we can consolidate a lot of those services in a campus format in downtown, in Eureka. So we're going to really be talking about that strategy, because there's a lot of efficiency in that. It's not just a lot of efficiency from an energy perspective, there's a customer service, servicing everybody to make sure that they're help them co-locate a lot of our services, who aren't running around all over the place. But also we need new facilities to recruit and retain employees. And we've seen that all over the place here in Humboldt County, where our larger organizations, especially healthcare organizations, really understand that a lot. We're seeing a lot of new healthcare investments in terms of with open door clinics, and having one here in Arcata and Fortuna and other places. But a lot of these organizations are investing in the infrastructure to just maintain their employees, not just their services. So that's going to be, and then also we will be getting into our climate action plan. We'll have a draft of that coming out as well, and hopefully we'll be able to take a lot more action on that as well. So those are kind of two things we're going to be really hitting in stride, I hope, coming up in the next year. But now I'm just ready for questions. That was too fast. No, just kidding. Go ahead. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, relationship of the supervisors and the county, as you see it, with PG&E, and what's going on with all of that, what the state is doing with them, and the other utilities, and so on and so forth.
Well, in terms of like our relationship directly with PG&E, I mean, we have, I would say, relationships with them on a working level. They have their, of course, they have their own internal chaos occurring right now, the bankruptcy and those other things. And within that, there may be some opportunities to help things get better in terms of the infrastructure. And we've seen, we went through this disastrous shutdown this last year. And part of one of those things was, the big surprise to everybody was our local power plant, our natural gas-fired power plant. We can talk about that in a minute, because we just chose that over wind. But that natural gas-fired power plant, we thought was ready to service us in terms of this shutdown, but it wasn't. It was a surprise to everybody. I mean, it was a surprise to people within PG&E, and I will put that on them a bit, but really, they had a big transition that occurred when they went from their, from their diesel powered, or their, plant to this natural gas. And basically, someone siloed that, and they got that all done, but it was just assumed that this was all going to be connected, and it wasn't just physically, it was also within their institutional. So the people with the institutional memory on how to like reconnect and redo all that stuff, they had moved on, and no one had really, there had not been a test of that system. So I will say that more than likely that is not going to happen again. We've been assured over and over that they're working on getting that all put back together, and I can't speak for them, because I don't know the details of what it is, but they're guaranteeing to us that they're getting past that. It's just a technological and an institutional issue they got to deal with, and so hopefully that's not going to happen again. Yeah.
I appreciate the idea of infrastructure and maintaining your buildings and consolidating, but one of the reasons that some services are spread out is for access for people, and Open Door is also very spread out for access. So if you take all the services that people need and put them in Eureka, you're going to create problems for people with disabilities and people who don't drive. And I mean, the reason that the county did this years ago was very much to make services more accessible in communities. So,
well, this isn't, I'm not talking about things in communities per se. Like our planning department, right, is in an old hospital, which is not accessible. I mean, it's terrible for 80.
Right.
That's an example.
So you're not talking about the services that you currently have in the different communities?
No, it's not talking about taking all our libraries and putting them into our library or anything like that. No, we're talking about services that are basically in and around the city of Eureka already that are just
in bad shape.
They're in bad shape, and they're kind of all over the place, yeah.
And then my other question was, what is the county doing and looking at in terms of housing? Because I know that different cities are looking at housing and how to develop housing. I just wonder how the county is addressing that, because you have the lion's share of property. I mean, it's in county, not you, but it's in the county area.
Right, that's a good question. So especially when we're addressing climate issues, right? Because really the bulk of our climate impact comes from transportation, and that transportation is directly related to where we work versus where we live, right? And so even though the county has the bulk of the land per se, the developable land in terms of its connection to utilities and all those things really lie within the city jurisdictions. And we really should be working more with cities to densify rather than create more sprawl, because in the end, we create more sprawl, all we do is create more traffic issues in the cities. We are really learning very quickly now the long-term sustainability of the single-family dwelling, and that development pattern is not sustainable, at least not under, and I'm going to say it this way, like in terms of like our Prop 13 and those sorts of things, because the long-term generation of tax revenues that come from that don't really pay for, which is why we're behind on our roads, which is why we're behind on getting social services out into rural areas. It's just not, it's not really that sustainable. And we're even seeing in folks there, young people who are trying to buy houses in some of the older neighborhoods, that the houses themselves aren't maintained to the level that they can actually get loans, right? Because the model by which people in the past were developing housing, you know, people are now having to have 2 incomes to maintain a house, and it's becoming harder and harder to do that, and it's just that we're having a hard time. So we are definitely looking for locations where we can have more housing, but it's really got to be in areas where we have those services. So like McKinleyville is a good example. But even in outside Eureka, we are having problems with asking for development fees. Humboldt County is the only county in the state of California, I think, that doesn't have any development fees, right? And so we have no way to basically bolster infrastructure with relationship to that. So it's a challenge.
The county was all set to buy a chunk of property there in Eureka, not far, from where the vacant parking lot is for parking.
Yeah.
And it seemed like once a little resistance showed up, they just dropped it like it wasn't a big deal. And is there an alternative? I mean, you can't build something on the gravel lot unless you have a place to displace that parking. Is there a plan in place you had a plan to buy that city block and make parking. It just kind of went away without comment. It seemed like in the newspapers at least.
Yeah, and that piece of property we were looking at wasn't for parking. That was just a temporary use of the site because we couldn't own substandard housing. We just can't do it. And so that we were looking at that property for this campus project that I'm talking about. So really, it's really that was kind of the long-term vision of that piece of property, which maybe you're familiar with. It's right across the street from the courthouse. There was a lot of controversy because the county, if we were to own that piece of property, we really would have to tear down the substandard housing because we're under an ADA consent decree from the federal government right now, which basically says you can't move in any direction unless it's ADA compliant, and everything that's not ADA compliant, which is a lot of things in Humboldt County, has to come up to code. So that's really what happened there. And so what would have been a temporary parking facility to help manage for this issue of the development on the gravel parking lot, which many people have seen, the gravel parking lot next to the county building. Why is it gravel? Well, because there's no point in upgrading it because there will be a structure built there. Basically, it's part of an expansion to our jail services there, and it's not a place necessarily to house more people in jail. It's really a transitional facility for probation and getting basically the services and more of those services that are out and about, getting those co-located, those social services for people in transition out of our correctional system. So that's what's going to go there, and we have to find parking, and I think probably what we'll be doing is, what we're really trying hard to do is work out a deal with the parking lot across the street that the state owns, which you see lots of vacancy in, and that's really what we need to do. And to be honest, we've looked at parking around the area, and yeah, I mean, we could, there is a lot of parking around there. It's just that we, as humans, don't like to walk more than a block to get someplace, and we tend to, get concerned about that, especially when it's raining. So we're working on that. But again, we really need to work on getting development into Eureka or Arcata and worry a little bit less about parking. And I know it's an issue here in Arcata a bit, but I have to understand, we used to have parking requirements in downtown Arcata, right, for development, and that created blight. Because what happened was we just had a bunch of vacant lots. And you remember 10 years ago, before the city of Arcata changed that policy, we had a vacant lot there, we had a vacant lot over there. This is 15 years ago. We had vacant lots all over the place because the cost of developing parking was basically causing it, development to not happen at all. And so we just had gravel lots. And so, now we have more buildings and more commerce in downtown Arcata because we lifted those parking requirements. So. I'm really going off into all kinds of directions. Yeah.
Well, I live on a narrow county-maintained road in the
Yes.
3rd district, and has a lot of potholes, and you know, the brush grows on it. And I want to compliment the county, because every year they bring the hot mix up and they fill the holes and they trim back the trees. And I know that I can appreciate the difficulty of maintaining, I don't know how many hundreds of miles of roads, and that they do that every year. So I want to thank the county for doing that.
I have an easier district than others. Well, thank you for that, thank you.
I
You know,
was
I
gonna
mean,
complain.
this isn't the road to Petrolia, right? You know, in general, I mean, we have some funky roads. They get funkier as you get out to like Neyland in terms of the 3rd district. But overall, you know, we have most of the population lives within fairly close, within 10 miles of these core, you know, dense population densities. So it is a little easier to placate the, to get to those places. But the farther out you go, the more difficult it really gets, and the more expensive. And that you look at like even like the road up to Neyland. I mean, that road is developed for the, was developed for literally horses and wagons, and so the geometry, the substrate, everything about it is not built like a road. It should be built, and yet, the expectation of people in the current context, in their current sphere, they expect it to be like a real road and have all the things that you might want to have on that. And the other thing that we're seeing, the change that we're seeing in terms of roads, is the vehicles themselves as a technology have changed so dramatically, even in the last 15 years. So a big truck, like when I was a kid, I grew up in southern Humboldt, and we didn't have 4-wheel drive so much as a young person. We had, like, maybe some people had the Toyotas. Yeah, or whatever. I had a Nova station wagon or something. It went everywhere, right? And we kind of lived in that context. And a lot of these streets that go down, just as an example, out in Freshwater, the road goes right through the middle of their community, and it has forever, since the road was built. And the technology of a vehicle, of a large truck now, with its microprocessors and its precise engineering, make a thing that is the size of a tank, because we created 12-foot lanes in the 1950s so that we could move tanks across the United States. That's where that standard came from, which is why American cars are so big. We built our cars into that space. Now we built the technology to drive them at 75 miles an hour, the size of a tank, during curvy roads. And now they're going through the middle of communities, right? And that is making people feel very unsafe around that technology. So that is something we're trying to engineer around and try and deal with. And that's part of one of the reasons why we did the speed tables through there, is because it was just getting out of control. People were feeling extremely unsafe, and they were, and people were getting injured, and so that's part of what we're dealing with, is that change in technology and on these roads. So will that help you? All right, what else we got? Anyone else? Any question or a comment or criticism or?
Well, you got away too cheap so far, because we didn't make you talk about the wind project. Is there any high ridge in Humboldt County that the tribe won't pull a trump card out and say you can't build it there? I mean, is it that simple? Should people just forget about it? Or are there possibilities?
Well, I mean, okay, anyone who followed that episode knows that I kind of went through an existential crisis during the middle of that, because we're not right at the end, really, to be quite honest. So I think there was a lot of problems that we had with that whole issue. Part of it was just a tsunami of, you're filming me, and I'm just going to say it, a tsunami of bullshit that was just covered that project in so many different ways, and I would say mostly from a negative perspective. And I would say that the misinformation that was just put out there was there was never a backfill to that. And I think part of that is culturally, people have a hard time speaking up related to things that if it involves a corporation or something that's big or whatever that is. I think part of the problem that we had with this project is that we have a tendency, and I'm in there too, something looks kind of big, I'm gonna think a little bit negative. That's why I live in Humboldt County. I don't want big, ugly, whatever that might be. But the problem is we have a confirmation bias problem. And so we consume information that feeds into that bias. And we tend to believe, even if it's not true, those things that, in terms of that. We also have a problem with not understanding that the status quo is not a neutral position, right? Especially as we talk about climate change and energy. So the status quo, not choosing that project, the project choosing, not choosing that project, not choosing that project is actually in essence choosing something else. We didn't really frame it that way, and it really didn't hit me that way until very late in the game, which is we chose fracked natural gas for our lights, right? Half of our energy comes from a natural gas plant on Humboldt Bay that sits at 12-foot elevation, by the way, and that's the choice, right? That was being presented was wind energy or fracked natural gas. And we never really talked about fracked natural gas as one of our choices. We just talked about wind energy, wind energy, wind energy, wind energy. And I think we had a big problem with that. But then going back to sort of the tribal issue, we definitely were not prepared for that. So when you ask the question and you frame it in a way, it's like, well, what's going to happen next? Well, what happens next is we got to do some more work. And sitting down, and I met with yesterday, before these days are kind of blending together, with tribal representatives of the Weow tribe to talk about what is the way forward on virtually everything else as we do this. And I think we just really need to be more proactive in that. We really lost track of something that at the landscape level we didn't really understand, and we left it to, as leaders, to a private company to deal with it, and in the end it just came crashing down right at the, there was no way to negotiate our way through that in a meeting in the public, in that space, in that way.
So
It's just not going to happen.
it kind of got too far before it was completely known that those issues need to be addressed more specifically and more directly.
Yeah.
I mean, the tribes don't have a problem putting ugly stuff on their property. They build casinos all the time, so maybe if you build a wind farm where you want it to get paid for it, it would work. But
I don't speak for tribes, and I don't think anyone really should except for themselves. And what I do know is that, the tribal entities are diverse, and they all don't speak for each other, and they all don't represent each other. And especially at the landscape level, that's just not the way that it works. And so, I mean, and part of the problem too is, non-tribal community often leverages what they believe to be tribal interests for their own sake. And you see that a lot, and I saw, I sit on the Coastal Commission, we didn't talk about that, thank goodness. But I've only been there, 6 months, and in my first meeting, right, where it was a tribal project, it was the hotel on Trinidad Harbor. And so I will have the same people telling me at that moment, like, we've got to stop this, blah, 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 blah. And then, 6 months later, stand with the Weow tribe, right? He's like, we have to be more consistent and understanding about what that means and be, better advocates for sort of the broader issues, I think.
So can there be a plan? I mean, can the county work on identifying places, saying, anybody have a problem with this? Map out locations that are going to work for everybody.
You can.
That's willing to speak up.
Yeah.
And then go out to the corporations and say, this is what we have available.
It's not, I mean, the law is, the county and the developer follow the law. So the construct of that is very simple and easy. The problem is that it doesn't matter in the court of public opinion whether you follow that or not in this context. So you can have the righteousness of be feeling that way, that I follow the law and all those things. But in the end, when I'm sitting there looking at this event that is unfolding in front of me and thinking, okay, I've got a future Standing Rock heading our way. I got the, what just happened in Hawaii, right, with the telescope. If that's the direction that we're going to go in terms of a project, it doesn't matter what the law says, but going back to, can we do better at planning? Yes, we can do better at planning this. We really need to pull a positive response from what just occurred. I certainly do. I have to tell you, it took me, I'm still not fully recovered. I haven't shaved since then. From what was, I believe, a sort of existential problem, because it's like we're being asked to decolonize, right, in terms of the common vernacular, and decarbonize. And how do we do that? We're trying to survive on this planet and, and come out on positively with our neighbors, and it is a very difficult thing to do. I'm hoping that we take some lessons from this and can move forward positively. But we got work.
But we also elected you to make hard decisions.
Yes.
And sort out it's bad because of corporations. Nobody's going to build a wind farm that isn't going to make money.
Well,
so there are elements that you need to decide to ignore because they're bogus.
And what I'm saying is, like, what I don't think people understood is, like, the other choice was the corporations that frack that we now support with our lights, right? So we didn't really do a good job of balancing those things, and I apologize, AJ, for taking.
I just want you to remember that sometimes the public can be wrong.
They can. They can be, and that wasn't really the point. It's like, what is the direct? I mean, overall, like, is that fight for this particular project going to be good for this community, or even wind energy in general? And so that's kind of where we really. I mean, that's where I had to really. And do I think I made the right decision? I really don't know. To be quite honest, I mean, I'm still grappling with that, and this was a tough one. That's all I have for you. Oh, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mike, for coming today and doing our program.
Thank you for having me, everybody.
Do you have one last thing?
No.
Okay. So we're out of time.
And you can sign me up for 9 a.m.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. That's
I was on it for 9 years.
Pick the right number, rookie.
Number 767826.
Just after
You picked by one?
No, 4.
Thanks.
Not yet.
Probably not.
And 767806.
You did pick the right one. All right.
Not that one, this one.
Yeah, I don't want to use it. I don't want to use the usual. Those are almost all white, huh? There we go.
All right, it's okay. You get your...